Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Gilezan, and welcome to this week's episode of Global Domination, where us agents in real estate are taking this world by storm. And today we've got a special guest. You know, he didn't put his last name up there, but I'm going to go ahead and tell him because this is my son, Dylan Gilezan, who has been in real estate now a little over a year and a half, maybe. Has it quite been that long? But he's been around real estate ever since he was about a month and a half old. And as I carried him through so many different appointments that I always assumed he would never get into this business. And then lo and behold, after graduating college, he decided this is where he wanted to be. But he's taken a different spin on it than what mom did. That's right. So anyway, Dylan joined EXP Commercial right away as we launched EXP Commercial. And he picked the title for today's show, Young, Dumb, and Hungry. How do you break the stereotype? So why don't we start there, Dylan, before we dive into your background and what you've been doing this year and a half in real estate?
Yeah, so young, dumb, and hungry. I think a lot of times when you're a young individual in any industry, but especially real estate, where it's a lot of people, over the age of 40 that kind of dominate things, you're going to have this stereotype of just being young and dumb. But in my opinion, after reading a book called by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, it talks about the advantages of disadvantages. Sometimes just because you have a disadvantage, that actually gives you an advantage. Specifically in real estate, everyone assumes I'm dumb. They may not be willing to help, but that gives me an avenue to try new things and really think about how I can provide value to the business with the changing industries, with all these new technologies that older people might just say, hey, that's not how I built my business. Don't worry about those things. Well, because I am young and dumb, I'm worried about those things. I'm pursuing them, trying to figure out different ways I can provide value that, quite frankly, the old heads are afraid to use. And so that's why I go with young and dumb. And then hungry is just part of that motivation, that drive. As soon as you start picking up paychecks, you may be slower to answer your phone. And at my age, I'm always answering my phone, always making calls because I am hungry. I want to eat. And I just use the whole idea of me being dumb. People may write me off, but I look at it as an advantage to come out the woodwork and hit them with something they haven't seen yet.
I love this because, and I'm going to talk a lot today about you not being my son, because as we work in different transactions together or separate, you brought a level of intelligence that I think shocks a lot of people, right? And so, when I got into real estate in 1999, I was 21 years old. And I get that because everybody looked at me and said, how in the heck do you know anything? But then I opened my mouth because I read, I educated, I was always learning. Still to this day, 24 years later in the business, every single day, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm learning, I'm educating myself. And I love that because, you show up to a meeting, whether it's on a Zoom or in person, and you open your mouth and they're like, who is this guy? Because frankly, sometimes, he comes up with things that, I don't have that intellect level, right? And so I think that has a lot to do with your college background and economics. Let's talk about that, how you've brought, what you learned in college into how you're doing real estate.
Yeah, so I studied economics and finance in college and also minored in Spanish. I was very fortunate to be able to travel abroad and spend a semester in Mexico and then half a semester in New Zealand. And I attribute my ability to go and experience these cultures. I've put a lot of weight on that. It taught me a lot about how to interact with people, think differently. America is the greatest country, but going to other countries, you quickly learn what's important to different cultures and people. And it allowed me to kind of go into conversations within my business without having this kind of, stereotype, this school of thought that gets stuck. I'm able to go into it open-minded and focus on listening and learning rather than being that professional who knows it all. So just because I come in and listen, a lot of people, because they have 20 years of experience, they think they know everything. They come in and kind of, bombard people with a bunch of jargon that makes it really hard to understand what's actually going on. I'm here to listen and then distill that information from my clients in the most simplest way possible. And I think that comes from, learning Spanish. You learn not everything always translates how you think it might. And so you have to be really conscious of how you say things and not bombard people with a bunch of intellect, even if you're smart, just because it scares them away from a deal or possibly working.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it. You jumped into real estate, which shocked me. I'll never forget the day you said, "Hey, I'm going to real estate school." Because I never thought growing up, not in the business, but alongside of the business, that you would never go into something, because of comments you made as a child. I will never do that. I will, I mean, come on, that's just what happened. So what made let's dive in deep. What made you go into that? Where was that decision from?
Yeah, I guess growing up, you were, mainly focused on residential real estate. And, I did do a little bit of residential real estate early on, but I always had this idea that I don't want to be a residential real estate agent. It's kind of, there's a lot of emotion and
You did enough open houses at 3 that it was enough for life, right?
yes, I didn't want to be picking up a cookie tray and then taking it to showings. I knew that wasn't me, but after learning more about commercial real estate as well as business brokerage, and then ultimately long term, I'd like to, be a real estate developer, be an entrepreneur of sorts. And this is a kind of I don't want to say means to an end, but a way to learn about business, learn about real estate, because you need business and real estate for any community to thrive. And so I look at it as kind of my foundation of education for what I want to do going on to my 30s, 40s, and 50s.
That's awesome. Yeah. And real estate development, I mean, it's in your blood, right? We're doing it now. And that's one of the things with going into real estate and building a career, to have the financial means to get into that in a big way. You're 24 years old. You've been doing this a year and a half. Let's talk about how you were able to obtain a city block in downtown Louisville all by yourself. Well, you and your partner, Cal. Talk
Yes.
to the audience about that, because this was impressive. This is the moment in time where a child doesn't come to the parent and say, "Mom, can I borrow money?" Dylan came to me and said, "Hey, I just want you to know I've purchased several blocks of property." And I was like, "With what?"
So I remember reading an article a while back about in Detroit, they have this thing called a land bank. So essentially, when properties are foreclosed on, they go to an auction, and then sometimes they sell through a bid, and sometimes they don't sell. What happens if they don't sell? They end up in a community land bank. Usually, these things are controlled by the city, the county. Not every county has them, but in Detroit, there was an individual who was a garbage truck driver. So you wouldn't think this is someone who would go down this route, but they found out about their land bank and started buying up $500 shotgun lots just whenever they could. And the restrictions back then were a lot different, but they essentially ended up buying a couple blocks that was then sold to a large developer that developed those blocks into a stadium. So he was able to buy each lot for $100 to $1,000 a pop. I think he invested a total of $100,000 and then was able to exit for multiple millions of dollars just selling the land and parceling it all as one. Once I read that, I looked up to see if Louisville, where we live, had a land bank, and it did. There are a lot more regulations with it. You can't just go out and buy a ton of them. But, and then another side of that, you also, once you buy them, you have to have plans and develop them within a 2 to 3 year period. So we located a couple land bank lots. These are not always in the best parts of town, but we found some that were as close to the good parts of town as possible, bought those, and then started doing some research in the area to see what other owners on adjacent parcels would be willing to sell. And we were able to track down 2 additional owners that kind of completed our first block, and purchased directly from them off market. So that was it's a more of a long-term play, still working on getting one more piece of it, and then eventually we'll develop it into something yet to be decided.
Okay, that's cool. No, I mean, it's a pretty proud moment, when because you all started doing that. I think you were 22 years old going down that path, and You know, hey, what a great way to start obtaining an entire city block. Ownership can happen. So that's phenomenal. So let's talk about real estate and business brokering. You know, you've got a niche about you that is not the typical, you know, realtor, right? You know, if you send Dylan to hold an open house, that's probably more like punishment, as he stated earlier. So you've got the business side of things, definitely the commercial real estate side of things. You've been doing a lot of tenant rep. You're working with all kinds of our clients, you know, that are needing to expand. You've got a lot going on in your pipeline, quite a bit. And I don't know if we want to disclose that number, but it's a good one, guys, a really good one. But let's talk about that. You started out with business valuation. Tell us about that certification.
Yeah, so I'm a certified value growth advisor. I took a course to get this certification, but it basically talks about, on a very general level, how do you value a business, but not just financials. A lot of people are very quick to say, oh, my business, let's look at the financials to see what it's worth. That's just one piece of the puzzle. It's a starting point. It's important, but it just gets the conversation started. If we were to think about Apple versus Dell, those are two very different companies, and just how you think about them, yet they're in the exact same industry and they started the exact same industry. They both make computers, but one has a significantly higher value and way more customers because of this idea of quality. And so when it comes to business valuation, I realized in the industry, a lot of people are quick just to pump out these financials and never give anyone any sort of value metric for their brand. You know, if you've been running a 100-year business and it's a brand that's recognized globally, there's value to that. Now, how do you quantify it? That is more complex than just looking at the financials. So a lot of people get scared at it. But with my business partner and I, we realized through the CVGA program, there is a way to quantify value, or to quantify quality, and then turn that into a number to be added to the value. And that's basically how we went about that. And with that expertise, it kind of brought us into the world of business brokerage, where people are wanting to exit, sell their businesses. And unlike real estate, you know, real estate, there's a lot less metrics involved. It's still complicated to value and you have to get an appraisal, but it's a little bit more straightforward. When it comes to a business, there's no standard procedure. You have so many moving factors. And that was our value add that kind of allowed us to break in and get experience in business brokerage. Where does commercial real estate come in? Well, commercial real estate, for the most part, 99% of the time is being done with a business. So that's someone buying a retail spot, an industrial warehouse, a restaurant, a variety of different things. There's always going to be a business in there. And those businesses may want to sell, they may want to expand. So whether or not they're looking to expand, you know, their footprint and buy more real estate, I can help them with that, but also expand in terms of the business. So if they want to get more employees, my business partner and I can help them on both the business and the real estate side, and making whatever they're trying to make happen.
That's awesome. No, and it's been great because we've gotten, you know, our team has gone in a very, you know, expanded and broad dynamic, because we're not just real estate brokers anymore. We've got this entire wing of the team now that can do business valuations, but also, like you said, be able to really diagnose the health of a business, which matters when it comes to what that business is ultimately worth, sometimes even more than the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. And I hope that, you know, people that watch this video, you know, they think about that, because I run into a lot of real estate professionals that have gotten into the business and they're just not thrilled, right? And, you know, you just got to find out what that niche is, because there's so much more than just selling houses or condos, or leasing commercial real estate, or selling commercial real estate. There's this whole entire portion, which at eXp Commercial allows for us, those that have the certifications and the experience, like Dylan and others, to be able to sell businesses. You know, you've done valuations on $300,000 businesses and $20+ million businesses. And so there's a pretty pretty big range out there. But, you know, anytime, and we've had Gerard Perello on here, who also focuses on business sales, you know, over the course of the next 3 years, there's going to be $3.5 trillion worth of businesses bought and sold. 3.5 trillion. There's only less than 8,000 brokers that identify as business brokers. But then your designation, how many of those exist? Do you even know?
I think there's a couple hundred. Um, it is a much smaller designation in terms of its recognition, but the guy who created it has been an M&A consultant and advisor for over 60 years. So when it comes to, okay, how do you actually assess the health of a business? He is an expert, and basically was able to learn from him and kind of distill it down into kind of more modern terms and make it easier for business owners to understand, because this designation is for people with a financial background and mindset. If you haven't studied finance, you can have a very good understanding of numbers and if a business is profitable. But when it comes to financial jargon, there's one term that represents, or 30 terms that represent the same metric. So being able to understand that is not always easy. And I was able to go to that course, realize, okay, this is hard to explain to a business owner without a finance background, what's ultimately important, to be able to simplify it so they can make better decisions without feeling like they need to go and get an MBA.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the hungry part, Dylan. How, because here's the truth, everybody. Yeah, we have a team. Dylan's part of our team, but you've been out drumming up your own business. You've been, dialing for dollars is what we call them. I still to this day, 24 years later in the business, I'm making phone calls every single day. That's how we're building our business. That's how we're networking. That's how, we're cold calling or we're warm dialing. There's so many different ways out there to do it. But let's talk about some of the ways that you've been able to drum up the business that you have currently in both business and commercial real estate.
Yeah, so I would say cold calling, I don't do unless it's warm. So obviously there's a difference between a cold and a warm call. I only focus on warm calls. They're a much higher percentage. And in order to make a call warm, let's say I do find a call and it's going to be cold. Well, before calling them, handwritten mailer, send it to them with your phone number, gives them the chance to call you. And any type of negotiation, you're in a better standpoint when someone comes to you. When you go to them, it's very easy to, for them to ignore you. So first of all, I would recommend to anyone, before you call someone, get in front of them first, whether that's a door knock, walking up to their business, their house, knock right on the door, introduce yourself. If they don't answer, leave a handwritten mailer in the mailbox. Or if you want, you can skip that, save the travel time, and just do a nice handwritten mailer blast. The reason I say handwritten is because people get a ton of printed stuff. Sure, you can automate, put their name in it, make it kind of personalized. But at the end of the day, a handwritten mailer will always convert better. Now, there are websites out there where you can have these handwritten mailers written by a robot. So you don't even write them. You can save the forearm strength and find your data set, send it out with the message, and then those handwritten mailers will be mailed. The first time we did that, I got 13 calls in one day from people owning $1 million plus assets asking me how I could help them get the biggest value for their business. A lot of those turned into somewhat of consulting engagements where I'm helping guide either the development of their business, but also helping them figure out how they can get the most value for their real estate. And then a few of those also just became, yes, if you can find me a buyer, here's a commission agreement. This is what I want for it. Now, if I would have cold called them, those conversations probably wouldn't develop into much. But when I do cold call, it's mostly when it comes to off-market properties that I have a client who is actively interested. It's kind of a cold call, but it's warm because as soon as they answer, you can say, your property here, I have a buyer. What kind of offer would you like? People are much more excited about that conversation than, hey, what are you doing with this property at whatever address? Okay, can I list it for you? Doesn't make sense. But if you come to the table and make sure you have clients who are ready to buy, or at least would want to look at the due diligence and review the deal, because that is your ticket into any of those off-market type of listings, even if you don't list it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So what else, are you, we've talked a little bit about the client base that you're working on, but, you've got everything from trucking companies listed to large industrial deals that you're working through, a lot of tenant rep things. You've been working with a medical company opening up offices all over Kentucky. So let's talk about some of those as to, your territory. We here at Gilezan Global, our territory of what we farm is the globe, and you're doing the same thing. You're farming all over the country. You're doing a whole lot of deals outside of Louisville, which is where you live.
Hmm. Yeah, so that really again comes to not being afraid to reach out. The way where Louisville is situated, we got quite a few states around us, and there's a lot of people in Indiana who own real estate in Kentucky, and people in Louisville who own real estate in Nashville. And when
Yeah.
you're working with clients who do own real estate all over the world, being able to explain that you have portability, they realize, oh, well, I don't need to have a realtor for every state I own real estate in. I can have Dylan or any other EXP commercial agent represent me on all of these deals. And that's kind of how we've gone about it. We've mostly focused on the Louisville market, but been very open to when we have clients in this market. A lot of time people who own real estate, they're going to own a lot of real estate if they're big investors, and they're probably not focused in one area. So being able to help them in other markets and not being afraid of budging into other real estate agents territory, you can get a lot more business just from one client and stick to servicing them rather than constantly chasing new clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and people that watch that don't understand the comment about because we're with EXP, I mean, that is what it is. We're one brokerage across this entire country. And so license portability is a real thing. You don't have to have a license in every single state to do real estate transactions. You just have to have your brokerage open. And so there's rules, with that you've got to dive a lot deeper in. But because we're with EXP, that is what has enabled us to expand past our market, which is Louisville, Kentucky. So Dylan's doing that in a big way, as well as so many other brokers and agents that have affiliated with EXP. Well, Dylan, I appreciate you coming on here today. I know it's hard to, sit here next to your mom, but hey, you're a businessman, you're a professional, and you've got a lot to bring to the table. And I love getting those phone calls from clients or email messages that say, Dylan has just blown me away because of, old soul in a young body, right?
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, Mom.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Global Domination. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day, everyone.